don't know if you noticed, but Generation Y really seems to be making a comeback lately. The late 90s are returning in full force. Everything's gotten that little bit grimmer, the economy's in the shithole, nobody cares about anything, misogyny is one of those cool things that people do now, and S Club 7 are going back on tour. Things just aren't great, let's face it. And now we're reaching the arse end of the year, the weather's colder than ever, I'm stuck inside with a broken ankle as I write this. Yeah, we could do better. But, nah, why should we? The millennials are growing up, you see, and they want everything they had when they were teenagers back. They're gonna throw another Woodstock again just so they can burn the entire fucking thing down, and before you know it, Fred Durst will run for president. And win. The late 90s are back again, folks. And hell, I'm prepared. I've got a bunch of new metal on my mobile phone, a channel that's already chock full of capsules from the late 90s and early noughties, and I'm ready to sit down with one of the more, well, questionable game series from the whole era. It started with a game that takes the entire concept of bad taste and leaves it mangled at the side of the road, and then made its weird way from there. Today we're going to look at Postal. The PlayStation generation brought a lot of people to gaming, and even made gaming somewhat fashionable for a time. Still, the cheap cred was reserved mostly for the generation's top level titles. The Tomb Raiders and Wipeouts were coolness personified. Those new glorious Japanese RPGs you're so fond of? They were not. And so inside this big melting pot there started to brew an alternative, and their interests intertwined with the alternatives of the time. Chuck Palahniuk novels, MTV2, No Logo, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, and any song that just happened to be produced by Ross Robinson. A big chunk of that was interested in making games a hell of a lot more violent, mostly, well, just for violence's sake. Early games that no one really remembers, like Loaded, set the scene, and then the big guns started to come out. This trend does include some classic games like Duke Nukem 3D and Carmageddon, twisted satires on pop culture and Hollywood machismo with more than a few subtle digs at your Tipper Gores and Joe Liebermans thrown in. Ever darker PC games fit in here too, like the original Fallout and its sequel. And of course, as much as people hate it when I constantly bring the series up, you've got the original Grand Theft Auto. It's hard to recall now, but there was once a game called Grand Theft Auto that was simply all about causing as much destruction as you could, with naught but a few simple go here and shoot people tasks to act as a kinda sorta storyline. This game fit right in. And hell, teenagers loved it to bits, they really did, certainly the ones I hung around with. It wasn't exactly cool though, not exactly the accepted face of gaming for the masses. Gaming grew exponentially during this time, and suddenly you had a big gap between the mainstream and the alternative. And then you had the mainstream starting to act as though they were the alternative. You still see plenty of games inspired by these halcyon days, Saints Row being perhaps the king of them all right now. A lot of the other big names either had much higher aspirations, or they quit while they were still ahead, or they made that one time where your Eugene Levy looking motherfucker of a dad tried to slam to Wait and Bleed look like the coolest thing ever pulled off. These were games to listen to Limp Bizkit by. But the original Postal, a PC game from 1997 by a bunch of super duper spiky hair boys called Running with Scissors, is kinda different to all of that. This is a game for people who listen to Gigi Allen and Anal Cunt. The alternative within the alternative that's that little bit more fucked up. Let's go have a look, shall we? Now, Postal doesn't really have a plot as such. You simply play as someone by the name of the Postal Dude, and you have one purpose, and that's killing people. Lots of people. And they don't necessarily have to be armed. You get some clues here and there. There's a U-Haul outside his home, which indicates that he may well have been kicked out of his house, and so that might be why he's going postal, so to speak. Going postal, for those of you who didn't know, is a term coined specifically to describe spree killings that take place at somebody's workplace. So the title immediately suggests a darker theme. Is this a complete born lunatic? No, it's someone who's been driven to the edge. As is so often the case with these things, the loner and mentally ill stereotypes being little but an easy and offensive crutch for those who don't really want to examine any of the reasons why spree killings take place. And hell, do I really need to go further into the title to explain why this game's so dark? Just look at it! The game itself is an arena shooter of sorts, in a similar though more detailed vein to Robotron 2084. We've gone from saving the last human family to killing them. You literally have to wipe out entire sections of the town in order to proceed. Naturally there's police and other people who'll try and stop you, but yeah, that's not always the case. I could kind of end the review there and just dismiss the whole thing as terrible taste and move on. The game wasn't even all that successful after all. But nah, one has to dig a little deeper and go darker, because in its own completely ham-fisted and utterly offensive way, that's what Postal was trying to do. Now it's not like there'd ever have been a good time for Postal to come out, but 1997, well, that was a particularly bad one. The idea of spree killings has changed over the years. These days it's so stupidly easy to think of it as a stereotypical American thing, sadly enough, even though there's no real reason why someone couldn't do the same thing anywhere else, and indeed they damn well have done. Back then though, it was seen as a problem the world over. A lot of particularly bad ones occurred in the mid-90s. The previous year had seen some of the very worst, and most of those were outside of the USA. Attitudes to guns and laws the world over changed massively. This was not exactly a safe zeitgeist to be riding on, nor was it an advisable one. Several things about Postal take it over the edge, from something that's just violent for the sake of violence, into something weird and unpleasant that almost tries to get inside of a killer's mind. The little diary entries you get between levels don't look wholly dissimilar from what you'd read in the manifestos that such people tend to write. A lot of the kills in the game aren't exactly clean in that people fall down and you move on. They writhe on the ground and beg for help or mercy. And yes, you have the option to execute them. There's even an option too, with those 3 little words that would become a signature catchphrase: commit suicide.
I regret nothing.
Little things like that kinda take the game over the edge. Of course, being edgy for edginess' sake was kind of a thing in the late 90s too, and I do have a strong stomach for a lot of this kind of stuff because I grew up with it. But still, yeah, this game does make me feel a little uneasy. In the midst of all of these little details, I couldn't even tell you what sort of point the game's trying to make. Is it even trying to make a point at all? And why is it all so mundane? Why is there no music or anything? The game finishes up, if you get that far, with an attempt on a school that the Postal dude doesn't go through with. He has a complete mental breakdown and ends up in an asylum. There are certain bits of twisted humour here, but they're few and far between, to be honest. This game is more than a little unsettling to play, and for me it does kind of fail at what it's trying to do. The whole voices inside the head shtick doesn't really work out well either. The plot in the manual speaks of someone's quest to stop a global pandemic, but does the game reflect that? It seems more like a "the disease is humanity and I am the cure" type thing, and it's not much of a justification. Maybe it's not meant to be one. It also fails at being in any way a good game. Honestly, it's terrible, and even if you could look past all the insanely problematic stuff here, you wouldn't exactly find a decent game lurking. Maybe some would even praise its envelope pushing, but I just don't see it at all for this game. Perhaps these were the reasons why, in the end, Postal didn't make all that much of a splash, despite being several orders more offensive than, say, Carmageddon was. It was an obscure PC game that few people paid attention to, and it just really wasn't all that good. Maybe a couple of hand-winning articles here and there, but nothing that people really picked up on. It would have been easy enough for people to completely forget about it, to be honest. However, One In With Scissors just had to go ahead and make a sequel, didn't they? Postal 2 came out in 2003, with the PC once again being the sole platform. And yep, it's all in 3D. And, well, to be honest, this is where the video takes a rather sharp left turn. Postal 2 is certainly offensive, it's certainly edgy, it's certainly violent, it's certainly all those things that bad taste demands, but it's in a completely different way from the original. Honestly, the name and the developer is all that really links the two games. The feel is completely different, and frankly the whole game feels like a total retcon. Perhaps One In With Scissors recognised their missteps. But yeah, this is a different sort of thing. It's more violent just for the sake of it, without much in the way of meaning, and the dark humour is ramped right up to be the main focus. It's all so ridiculous and surreal that while you may be grossed out by it, it's hard to be perturbed by it in the same way you would be by the original. This is just, well, a bunch of yucks. And unsurprisingly, the game is a hell of a lot better for it, and it produced results to boot. When people think of Postal, they don't usually think of the original game at all. They think about this game, as it was the series' only real moment in the sun. Now, like I said, I do have a strong stomach for this sort of thing, and sometimes my humour can be just a little bit bad taste. So yeah, my opinion of Postal 2 is a bit more positive than the original. A lot more positive, in fact. For all the game's flaws and for everything that's problematic about it, I kinda have a soft spot for it. Hell, I'll even just go ahead and say it. Postal 2 is good, and I really enjoy it. Now, why is that? Let's see now. Postal 2 once again puts you in control of the postal dude, with all events from the last game seemingly forgotten. Nowadays you're living in a trailer in a town called Paradise with only your wife, your dog, and your crack addiction for company. The aircon doesn't work, the conversation's pitiful, and you've got a whole bunch of jobs to do. Why, you've got to go get some milk, return books, confess your sins, get tested for gonorrhea, all sorts. So yeah, that's what you have to do. A whole bunch of thoroughly mundane shit. And of course there's a load of weapons and people around. So yeah, on the surface, Postal 2 can seem like a sandbox of violence. You have these tasks to do, and for no reason at all you can kill a bunch of people while you do them. Not much to say, surely. Well, there is a bit more to it than that. The town will actually go to all sorts of different lengths to stop you from just going about your shit. You get plenty of scripted events, like a bunch of protesters against violent video games rushing the One with Scissors studio, for yes, the developers included themselves in the game, armed to the teeth, but you also get a ton of scraps and fights occurring in the outside world to boot. And you can choose to get involved in it, or just try and leave it alone. If there's one thing Postal 2 does brilliantly, it's constructing a world that actually feels very alive. There's always something new going on, and it's never usually the same shit. This all contributes to the real challenge of the game, which is unlike virtually any other game of this type. The game pitches itself as one where you can be just as violent as you want to be. It's possible to go through the whole week of tasks without killing anybody at all. Doing this actually requires great skill, but it is doable. It requires swift movement and careful manipulation of the game's AI. Everyone can go after each other at all times, and as long as they're distracting each other, you can slip away in those times where people are just going to come for you regardless. Playing this way also tests your patience. Look, here I am, in a line to get an autograph from none other than the late great star of Different Strokes himself, Gary Coleman. And so I wait, and I wait, and I wait, and eventually, after enough time's passed for Foreign to sing an entire fucking album's worth of songs about gold, I get the autograph. Sure, then the police bust in and try to arrest old Gary, who then starts slinging grenades everywhere, but hey, I didn't do it, nobody saw me, you can't prove anything. In this way, the game tests your patience while forever goading you with the easy way through. It's a hell of a lot harder and slower to go through the game in this way, but Postal 2 does do a good job of making it into a worthwhile challenge. But of course, well, the thing about the easy way is, sometimes it's just too tempting. This is, after all, a game where you can shout at someone, urinate on them as they cower in fear, knock their head off with a baseball bat, and kick it around like a football. And all because they didn't want to sign your petition.
Hi there, would you like to sign my petition?
Have you ever experienced the unparalleled joy of picking up a cat, shoving it on the end of your shotgun and using it as a silencer? And hey, don't sweat it, animal lovers. So long as you release the cat's rectum from the gun's clutches after 8 shots, it'll be walking about just fine. They got 9 lives, you see. This is the level we're at. It's falling down, taken to a ludicrous extreme, and then diluted through the collected works of Tom Green. Why should I wait in line to see Gary Coleman anyway? Why don't I just set the first person I see on fire and get to him that way? And if he dies, then, well, it doesn't matter. Autographs are worth more after celebrities die, aren't they?
Hi there, would you like to sign my petition?
Postal 2 is first and foremost a sandbox for extreme, unnecessary and, well, good old honest family fun violence. And if you want to do a lot of it while dressed in a gimp suit, hey, no problem. Sure, there's a lot of skill involved in a pacifist one, but it's kind of a lot easier to do it this way. The ability to vary how you play so much is kind of a happy accident more than anything else. And yeah, if you want to let off a bit of steam, well, go ahead. I make no apologies for enjoying games where I can be a hulking great asshole bitch, and the ability to do that is Postal 2's MO.
Would you please sign my petition?
But then, of course, there are the actual attempts at humour and satire dropped around the place, a lot of which do fall flat on their arse. Postal 2 can be one of the funnier games around, but that's normally only for events that happen in play. The actual humour here is way below frat boy level at best, with, let's be honest, a whole load of problematic stereotypes thrown in. It's what you'd expect, really. It's kind of a shame, as there'd be potential for something a lot wittier here, with more amusing commentary about how we tend to play games involved, but then maybe I'm asking a bit too much. Scatological humour is the order of the day, and you'd be a fool to expect anything else. I do admit to getting a bit of a kick out of the Senator Joseph McCarthy Public Library, though. The commentary side itself does kinda creep up sometimes, with the game almost acting like the devil on your shoulder trying to convince you that this is what you should do, rather than just plain forcing you into doing it, but yeah, it's feeble. In the end, Postal 2 is worth more as a piece of ludicrous fun. It's stupidly offensive, the gameplay itself isn't that brilliant, typical Unreal Engine fare, and it can be a little buggy on occasion, but the surreal nature of the situation and the anything can happen mood it sets makes it very entertaining. There are good reasons as to why Postal 2, despite generally middling reviews, gained a cult following and is still remembered and played to this day, and these reasons go beyond its simple lack of taste. Now, speaking of lack of taste, oh, holy shit, look at the next step on the ladder. What with the lack of any real plot or much in the way of characterisation, you wouldn't think that Postal would be the ideal candidate for any kind of movie. But then no one counted on German auteur Uwe Boll. The man's whole career is dedicated to making, well, questionable adaptations of video games. He's the man behind House of the Dead, Alone in the Dark, Far Cry, you get the picture. He calls his contemporaneous directors fucking retards and challenges his critics to boxing matches, which he usually wins. So maybe I should choose my words carefully. Anyway, Uwe Boll released the Postal film in 2007 and, well, the thing about Uwe Boll is that he's very literal as a director. I asked how you could make an adaptation based off a video game with no real plot or much in the way of characterisation, and the answer is that you make a film with no real plot or much in the way of characterisation. Simple. Postal is little more than 100 minutes worth of gross sketches with a very loose plot tied into it. It's a pretty faithful adaptation, to be honest. It's just a lot of shit thrown at a wall. Does it work as a film? Well, no, but it's probably the best thing that Uwe Boll's ever produced. All you really need to know is that yes, silencing your gun with a cat is just as effective here as it is in the virtual world. And with that we can move along. The next step came, well, not all that long ago actually. Postal 2 had enough of a cult following for another sequel to be worth doing, and hell, going 3D worked so well last time, it'll be even better with souped up graphics from the current generation, won't it? You can see it now, the kin of bad taste coming back to show all those Saints Rows and the like just how it's done. Trouble was, Running with Scissors wouldn't actually be doing it this time. They were only ever a smallish studio at the end of the day, and they decided to license Postal out to an altogether bigger company, a Keller, from Mother Russia. They'd handled the Russian ports of the first two games previously, and they'd been quite successful to boot. Plus they had the resources to make a sleek, modern version of Postal, and Running with Scissors didn't. Therefore they seemed to be a natural choice. Postal 3 finally hit the shelves in late 2011, promising an all-star cast consisting of folks like Ron Jeremy, Jennifer Walcott, Randy Jones from The Village People, Hugo Chavez, Osama bin Laden, and of course, Uwe Boll. Business as usual then, all the fun of the previous two, well, the second game in a thoroughly modern package. And, well, the game got absolutely scorched, receiving almost as bad a treatment as Duke Nukem Forever did. Critics detested it all around, and it has a score of 24 on Metacritic. Wow! Wow. Surely it can't be that bad, can it? Or, well, what happened? Let's go ahead and find out. Of course, low review scores wouldn't have been unexpected. This series was never a critical darling. So let's take the fan approach with this, shall we? Yeah, even though I'm not all that much of a fan, to be honest. Let's just take the second game as a comparison and start there, right? Right. Not that it matters too much, because whichever way I look at it, this game is absolute rubbish. A major, major clusterfuck. I wasn't actually able to play all that much of it because the game decided to completely collapse on me, but Basically, it gets rid of the sandbox approach of the second game and goes for a third-person effort where you've got to complete a bunch of incredibly dull missions. The first proper mission started with me sucking up a bunch of tissues filled with cum at a pawn store and then flinging them at a bunch of hockey moms who tried to trash the place, one of whom looked suspiciously like Sarah Palin. The next mission had me trying to grab a bunch of HIV-infected feral cats while a gang from a Mexican sushi restaurant chased me because they were using the cats for their food. And, well, yeah, you kinda get it, don't you? It's a very generic, crappy action game, only with the unfunniest parts of the second game attached, the actual attempts at humour, rather than the things that happened just through interacting with the world. There's no spontaneity here, and the most fun you'll get out of the NPCs is watching them openly masturbate in public. And while gameplay has never exactly been the strong point of these games, holy shit, this is a chore, with a stinker of a camera and horrible stiff controls. And, well, yeah, this was the third level. No comment. It's thoroughly broken.
Nice level design.
Yep, you said it, dude. Leaving aside how broken the game is, Akela clearly didn't have any idea about what actually made the series, well, the second game, stand out, and just went all out for bad taste humour. And yeah, it totally falls flat. Like his stupid dad when he tried to slam to weight and bleed that one time. Postal 3 absolutely deserved the critical mullering it received, and everyone put their best steel-tipped boots on to give it a damn good kicking, including, eventually, One In With Scissors itself. They openly said that Postal 3 was not the sequel to Postal that they had envisioned, and a few months after the game's release they actually removed the game entirely from their online store. They flat out admitted that the game was a mistake, and not one that they would be repeating. They also said that Akela certainly did have the resources to make such a game like this, but economic problems put them directly into the shitter. So yeah, I guess this is a pretty good metaphor for their relationship now. There's even this recently added hidden Easter egg in the Steam version of Postal 2 which sums up One In With Scissors' thoughts even further. One In With Scissors declared that the next Postal game, whenever that may come, would be developed entirely in-house. And so far, that's the end of the story. Oh, well, actually no it isn't. At the time of this video there hasn't been any details on the new Postal game coming anytime soon, but Postal 2, ever since returning to Steam for a Greenlight campaign in 2012, has apparently sold bucket loads, hundreds of thousands of copies. It's such a success that One In With Scissors are planning to release Paradise Lost, a brand new expansion for the game that adds even more evisceration-based fun to the pile. It should be out very soon, and considering that the game has been out for 11 years now, yeah, that's pretty good going. There's certainly life in this old dog yet. My guess is that there will be something bigger to come at some point. One In With Scissors are at least honest about having made a big fuck-up with Postal 3, which is kinda rare. It wouldn't surprise me to see a campaign for a new Postal game crop up, possibly on Kickstarter or something like that. And I'd also bet quite a bit on said campaign being very successful. These games are all, well, they're kind of typical and atypical. There's a lot of games like them, but also very few games like them. You can go into just about any sandbox game ever made and have a whale of a time torturing NPCs in various ways, but few games actually just went ahead and made that the main focus. It also did so in two entirely different ways, one which resulted in one of the more legitimately offensive games ever created, and the other which was just a silly rollercoaster ride of grossness, but one where the game actually kinda found its feet, and then pissed on them. You can still see the legacy of Postal to this day. Games like Saints Row owe a hell of a lot to Postal 2, because it was one of the first games of this sort to make a grounded in reality, well, kind of an optional extra. I'm pretty sure the bods at Volition or whatever they're called now would cite the second game as a massive influence. And as for the first game, well, don't you recall a trailer for that Hatred game that cropped up recently? A game that proclaimed to be a rebellion against political correctness or whatever, something that would be right on the bleeding edge of the controversy-drome and hopefully give Joe Lieberman a heart attack along the way? Yeah. Look at it, and then look at the first game again. Don't kid yourself, folks. The first Postal did this exact same thing in the exact same way over 15 years ago, and that's all that Hatred's gonna be, for better or worse. Likely worse. Either way, the continued popularity and intrigue surrounding Postal means that no matter what happens in gaming in the future, there's always going to be someone who's only ever interested in pissing up your